Hello everybody, thank you for joining me for this time-lapse painting. Now before we begin, here is the final painting completed. I called it Almost Unicorns, and mostly because golden horses are rare and I really like horses, so I felt like making some unique horses, and there they are in the middle of a nice grassy field somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And so we begin the painting with just a light sketch. For this one, what did I even? I kind of just looked at random farms for sale, and then I just picked out a couple area things I liked. Like they liked the mountains in the background. From the one picture, I picked out the trees and the bushes, and then the tall grass from a different farm, and so on and so forth, until I kind of imagined the right thing. And then the clouds, I kind of just went through memory from my own thing. As you can see, I already threw in the mountains. That was such a quick. It became such a quick step that fortunately I wasn't able to record it. But I also was gonna cover it all, so it's not a big deal. As you can see, I'm covering it with kind of the under texture of the trees. And then I started throwing in just the trunks, which I'll later cover with a different layer. And you can see I also did the grass. I did like an underpainting of the grass and of where the bushes will be, just to create a little bit more pop, something that sticks out a little bit more. And then when I get the horses, I just use a couple of pictures from a different references. I think I use Instagram for that. It's just the one to search on the horses to see what I can find, and then I found a couple of horses just hanging out. Oh, two different horses, two different pictures of horses, and I put them next to each other because I wanted them to stand kind of like friends. Can't just have one lonely horse. As you can see, I'm now adding some of the pokiness of the trees, the leaf-like element. I'm using one of my favorite brushes, as I always talk about. It's just a thin round brush, less than a millimeter, I think. And just scoop up a little dab and throw it on there. I think this painting took me, I don't know, maybe like 20 hours to make. All the little details, those fine details I'm throwing into are time consuming, and although it's my favorite thing to do because it's kind of not mindless, it's nice when you do them because then you can listen to podcasts or music or whatever, and so it makes the time go by a little quicker. Yeah, even when you're painting, sometimes there's moments where you just want to get through certain areas because they become monotonous and so repetitive that it's not the most enjoyable experience. But then you get used to it and you just empty your mind. One of the main reasons I made this painting was I just like tall grass, and then I wanted to have a subject. Horse is always a nice subject because, you know, usually in a tall grassy area, I think of horses just running around, so I threw them in there, or added them, I should say, to the composition. I also want to master making tall grasses, as you'll see later when I use the piping bag or cake decorator. So this is part of the reasoning I have behind this painting. I also wanted to make just a nice landscape painting in general, something to be proud of. the painting is 16 inches or 20 inches by 16 inches, so 20 inches in length, or excuse me, 20 inches in width, 16 inches in height. That was just me changing the light a little bit, because sometimes having light come from different directions lets me see how the texture is doing, because if you just see it from one direction, you might not catch mistakes you made once the light shines from a different direction. So that can be a bit of a pain in the butt. It's happened before, when if you only get one lighting from one direction, you kind of only work off the light, and then it hides all the mistakes you can make from a different direction. And you saw me adding the Komodo branches, some of the dead ones that are just floating from the trees. And now here I go adding just a little bit of a mistiness in the background, just so I can make it seem more farther in the back. And then I start adding these little dabs, just little itty bitty dabs that are supposed to be kind of like grass. It's like silverish grass. And then once I get a little bit farther down the painting, I will start using the piping bag. And there you go. I ended up going through a couple of different tips on this painting, the piping bag tips, those silver things you see that the paint goes through. Because for the first one, I wanted it to make it as thin as possible, the hole that it comes out of, but it caused problems when it came out. It kept on curving so much that as it came out that it wouldn't stay in a straight line. So then I had to get a different tip. And when I say edit it, I mean I took pliers and just squeezed the holes more shut. But really, it's really important to get like a proper tip, which I did. I ended up taking a break at some point and then just buying one off Amazon, which still kind of wasn't great, but it was thinner and it made the job better. See, I'm using right now the tip that was giving me a pain in the butt. As you can see, it's kind of like white at the tip, and I squeezed it all together so you can just use one of the little holes that I made in it. And after a while, I kind of got better at it, kind of got used to like how to adapt to the paint coming out of the tip and a curved line. I'm not exactly sure when I changed to a new tip. I think it's when I changed the color. But again, we're back to just the monotonous part. But actually this part isn't as monotonous, even though it's repetitive, because I have to think of every little grass stroke individually, which is kind of fun, because you gotta like, okay, this one's gonna go left, this one's gonna go right. Each one has to have a little bit of a character to itself. I switch to a different color just so I can overlap things as I go on later. Adding some of the little back bushes and foliages, and later add a little bit more over those two. Pardon my head. Hope you guys like my table that I'm working on. Just a bunch of planks nailed together on some horses. Horses are just the name of these little, or these legs that you use for put together tables, I guess. And we switch to this color. I really like this color a lot. That like tealish, light teal, that pastel color. Here I'm making the bush. One thing I really enjoy about the piping bag is when you squeeze out the paste at the right proportions, it starts coming out in like these little curls, and you can use the curls to create better foliage. I ended up buying a bunch, so you can see me using different ones. That's because I bought a bunch of different tips, or different dimensions. They're all little circular holes, but they are helpful to have many at hand at the same time. Here I'm just adding little lines. I didn't want to use the piping back for this. I just wanted to add kind of like more rougher textures, but of course I realized how much longer it's taking me to do it with the brush, so I switched to a piping back anyways. And more of the little curly squeezes. You can't see it on this time lapse because it's going so fast, but when you squeeze it out, like I said, it comes out like kind of like a corkscrew, which makes it really cool. I really like that effect. And here I am adding more different grasses, and then the curliness of it. That was a great example right there. Then we're on to the horses. This was probably the most time-consuming part of the painting, just forming the horses. I started with brown just because brown's much cheaper to use than the gold I would usually use. Or usually, the gold I'll use to paint them afterwards. And I like the brown because it kind of contrasts with the reddish. Oh, the brown's kind of a reddish color, and it contrasts with the greenery area. So like you can get a little bit more pop, so I can tell better what I'm doing. And for the brush, I'm using what's it called? 1mm, maybe a little thicker one. I have like 1/2 millimeter, 1/4 millimeter, 3/4 of a millimeter thick, millimeter, 1.25 thick millimeter brushes. Just actually, once you get to like really thin lines, sometimes you want diversity, even though you can't really tell. I can, and it bothers me if I don't have that variety. So while the horses dry, I go back into adding more detail to the field, more little, and then that dries. While that dries, I go back to the horses. I actually leave a couple of parts out when it comes to the horses, just because it's more of just etching out little details and muscles on the horses that I know won't look good on time lapse. Like even now, I can tell that like there's not much you can tell from watching this. Maybe I should have just zoomed in camera, but I don't want to zoom in the camera on this. Plus, I'm making these videos more as a showcase than as a tutorial. If you actually want tutorials, just let me know in the comments. I can like be more time intensive with these parts, but usually I don't want to do that simply because I spend more of my time painting than I want to spend on video making. So here I'm glazing or adding translucent layers or transparent layers over the painting just to give it more character, more depth, more contrast, you know, all the cool things. So and now we're adding just the final little bits to it. There shouldn't be much more left. I think I've used about 4 different piping bags in this one. And there you can see a little coffee I just have added there. Or an espresso, my brother makes me an espresso. He hands it to me sometimes. Here I go, adding yet another layer of texture over the brown one with gray. I'm making it gray because it's gonna require less gold layers later on when I paint over the brown, because the gold, no matter how much I paint it over, it's still somewhat translucent, so you'll see the brown, and rather have a more light layer over it. So I made a gray for the final texture layers. And what I'm really doing, I already had the texture kind of done completely, but when I go over it again and just make the horses pop even more because they were a little bit flat. that dried, I added a little bit more, what's it called, a little bit more translucent layers, and then here we are adding the final little bits, the gold, making up our stars. God, I don't even know what I'm doing. Oh, I'm adding just finer branches to the trees, just much finer branches. Adding some smaller details. And of course, trying to make it so the horses don't pop so much that the field looks just dead and they look just completely popping. Anyway, this is what it looks like when it's done. Thank you for joining me. Take care.